Driscoll with EMS Now, and it is my great pleasure once again today to speak to the man from Europe, Dieter Weiss. He is the preeminent market researcher of the EMS industry in Europe. And I always appreciate speaking to him because he always speaks to my roots in market research in this industry, how I started there 20 some years ago. So it's always good to catch up. Dieter, it is good to see you. How are you, sir?
Good morning, America. Good morning, Eric. Good afternoon, Europe. Good evening, Australia. I'm really happy to be on your show again today. I feel fine. I have lots of work. The EMS industry has lots of work. And as you can see in my back, I got now a lot of supporters from the European EMS industry. And I can only tell you it's a brilliant industry we are working in. Not only nice people, but very professional people, a professional industry. And we are highly competitive to the Asian EMS industry, especially looking at Eastern Europe. We are doing very well. And I can only invite you, come to Europe, bring your orders and have them manufactured with the professional EMS people in Europe.
Excellent. Well, there's a good endorsement. Listen, we got a lot of topics to cover. So you recently, this week, you did a big industry presentation over there for the Estonian Industry Association. What was that, just an update about how the industry is?
Well, the Estonian Electronics Industries Association, which is run by their managing director, Arno Kolk, a very professional guy, they do a seminar every year, and they do it normally after the Productronica or Electronica, whatever is on the year, and they do it in either late November or early December, which for Estonia is a nice time of the year, because when you go over to Estonia, to Tallinn, to the capital, they normally have already light snow. They have a beautiful Christmas market, and it's worthwhile to go over there a couple of days earlier. And it is on purpose that this seminar is always being held on a Monday. So people can travel to Estonia already on either Friday night or on Saturday morning and spend some free time in Estonia as well. And this year, unfortunately, we had to do a virtual seminar, all digital, because the restrictions to travel to Estonia were too tight to go there. That was a pity, because I love the people over there. I regretted not having seen them, and I enjoyed going to the Christmas market in Tallinn, the evening before the seminar as well. So that was a pity. But the seminar itself, I have now been giving an update about the European EMS industry for the third time. So the Estonian Electronics Industry Association invited me now for the third time to speak about the EMS industry. I assume that my presentations cannot have been all that bad, otherwise they would not have invited me. But then there is companies from Estonia, international companies. You know, there are a lot of international companies manufacturing in Estonia. But we had people from Lithuania as well. We had people from Latvia. We had people from Scandinavia. All in all, there were about 200 attendees who watched this seminar, and it was a good session, very interesting. And afterwards, I read a lot of positive feedback on LinkedIn.
Oh, good. Hey, listen, I'm going to pull up one of the slides that you did there because it's always good to start with the big picture here, I think,
Yeah.
and people appreciate seeing that. Hopefully you see that it should be the forecast, your forecast.
Yeah, yeah. Let me just explain
Speak
the
to this,
forecast.
please. Yes.
The red bar is Eastern Europe. I still make a difference between East and West in regards to the old, what we used to call the Iron Curtain. There was a separation before 1990 where the East was all communist countries and the West were capitalist countries.
Hold on, this is breaking news. Hold on a second. I got to make a note. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, and we still have a difference between the East and the Western countries. And the big difference is the labor cost. And you wouldn't believe, but I made this investigation last year, because last year we celebrated 30 years of reunification of Germany.
Yeah.
And our politicians told us that we still had a way to go in Germany, as the labor cost difference in Germany was still 20%. So meaning Eastern German employees were paid 20% less compared to the West. So I wanted to find out whether that was true for the EMS industry in Germany as well. And I analyzed about 100 companies, 70 from the West and 30 from Eastern Germany. And very astonishing, it was not 20% difference. It was 30% difference.
Aye.
So there is still a huge difference in Eastern and Western Germany. And now, for me, as a market researcher, it is very important to analyze the picture in respect to seeing the differences, seeing the inequalities, and then analyzing this. And if you compare, and that's what you see on the chart, Eastern Europe and Western Europe, you see that Eastern Europe has been growing much faster in the past. And in actual fact, Eastern Europe, for the first time, overturned the production value of Western Europe in 2018. Yeah, they were more or less even, but in 2019, you see that the Eastern production value is much bigger. Now, if we compare this industry, you have to realize that there is only about, I think, 420 EMS companies in Eastern Europe, whereas there is 1,700 companies in Western Europe. And the growth of this industry, of the EMS industry, was totally different in the East and the West. In the West, we have companies that are more than 50 years old. Just to look at the biggest one, let's take Zollner in Germany. They celebrated their 50th birthday, I think it was 2 years ago or last year. Yeah. In the East, most of the companies were founded after 1990 when the borders opened. And then it was companies from the West and global EMS companies that said, we need to take advantage of the lower labor cost in the East, let's open up a factory. And if you look at it today, the biggest EMS or ODM company in Europe is still Foxconn. Yeah. Foxconn does about 17% of the revenues of Europe. And if you have a look at the 5 factories of Foxconn, which is, for example, PCE Paragon in Hungary, which is Foxconn, the former Sony company, which Foxconn bought in 2009 from Sony, manufacturing TV sets for Sony. And then you take the factories in the Czech Republic, and they have several there in Pardubice and in Kutna Hora. and you add up all these revenues, you get to 7.3 billion euros in revenues. Now you have to realize that is the same revenue size that the 548 EMS companies in Germany are making all together.
Combined.
Yeah, so there's a huge difference. And in the East as well, we have big companies like Wistron, like Inventec. And then if you take the big global EMS like Flex, like Jabil, they are doing quite some substantial revenues over there as well.
Hey, Dieter, let me just for definition too, because I think that's important. What I really appreciate about your work is in order to be included in your numbers, you have to be in Europe, be a company in Europe or doing manufacturing in Europe. And B, you have to do printed circuit board assembly as a core service. Is that still correct?
Sorry, I didn't get it acoustically.
I'm saying to be included on your list, you have to be manufacturing in Europe and you have to be doing printed circuit board assembly as a core service.
People who do printed circuit boards are not part of my statistics.
But the assembly, I said.
I have a colleague. It's Michael Gush of Data for PCB. And he analyzes the whole European PCB market, which today is only about 190 companies left.
Yeah.
But Michael Gush has very detailed data on that.
I meant for your numbers. Your numbers, it has to be.
My numbers, I do the companies who, the definition is, a company is only an EMS company if they do PCBA.
Right.
So my numbers do not include pure cable harness manufacturers. My numbers do not include companies who only manufacture electrical switchboards or so. My numbers do not include mechanical work that is done as a subcontracting work. Okay. It has to be PCBAs as a hardware production. And then, yes, it can have cable harnesses on top. It can have the box building. It can have embedded engineering and you name it. It's see, my companies or the revenues of the companies can in most cases not split up into the different areas. Only big companies, like for example, Jabil, they do electronic manufacturing service, and then they have a second segment called diversified manufacturing service. Yeah, so there you can separate, but in normal instances, this is the overall revenues. And in actual fact, if you remember earlier the year, I had been talking about Europe in 2019 to have a production size of 45 billion. And now you only see 44 billion. There is $1 billion missing. Now, what I do at the beginning of a year, I look at the old data and then I have to extrapolate the numbers to the next year. That is fairly correct as long as people have a constant flow of work. In the East, it is a headache for the simple reason that the big companies might shift their production from one factory to another one, and for sure they are not telling me, which means I find it out the soon they have published their annual numbers in the country registers. And for example, for 2019, I got a big surprise. Wistron in the Czech Republic reported revenues 540 million euros lower than the year before. And the same was with Inventec. Inventec as well had nearly 200 million less in revenue. So those two alone had made about 750 million euros less in revenues in 2019 compared to 2018. And there were another smaller surprises. So mid of the year, I normally have a very good picture, and I had to correct the number to 44 billion euros for 2019.
Okay.
That is why you, for example, if you look at the upper right corner of my charts, you always find a revision status. It is very, people once in a while wonder, my competitors never change their figures because they just guess them once and then they leave them the way they are, no matter what happens. Now, I do real numbers, and real numbers change. And that's why I have a revision status. And you can always see when was this chart last updated in order to find out how accurate is it now.
Yeah. So let's get into the numbers. I'm going to bring you back on screen here. So I guess there's a lot of questions involved here. The difference between East and West is one, but also the sectors that are being served. I know that you spoke some, and I saw a slide here, maybe I'll pull it up, about the automotive industry, right? That automotive was an industry that's really been hurt this year, right, for EMS companies. But how do you see the sectors? What are the ones that are maybe underperforming? What are the ones that are maybe driving the?
Well, see, it's difficult, or I don't know whether it's appropriate for me to make such a statement, but I got the feeling that the automotive industry had not done a proper planning of their production. If you look at the number of new cars registered in Europe, you could have seen a constant decline of the number of cars registered, new cars registered, but as well the number of cars being manufactured in Europe. We have seen one area in the automotive industry which had seen a good growth rate, and that is SUVs. Now, we know as well, since 2018, the Trump administration has pushed the German automotive industry heavily, always threatening to apply special tariffs for the German automotive industry in specific. The answer of the German automotive industry was that the segment with the biggest growth rate was more or less moved to America. In actual fact, a lot of German SUVs are today manufactured in the United States, securing American jobs, not European jobs. So this argument to threaten the German automotive industry to apply tariffs was totally stupid. In Europe, we saw that the automotive industry still held the build programs very high compared to what they actually sold. So it was, in my opinion, foreseeable that one day they would have had to do a dramatic cut in the building program, specifically to their first tire suppliers. And so no matter whether COVID or not, I think COVID was just an excuse to finally have a reason why to cut the building programs. The building programs were cut dramatically in the first quarter of this year, and people having a huge market share supplying PCBAs to tier ones from the automotive industry, they were suffering bad. And I did an analysis after I saw the revenue figures for the first half of 2020 this year. And you can see, and that's what you see in the chart, is people with an automotive share of more than 70%, they had a revenue decline of 25 to 30%, which can easily be life-threatening. Yeah? And even companies with more than 20, 25% in automotive industry, automotive share, they were doing something in the region 7 to 10% minus in revenues.
Yeah.
Now, an analysis below a 20% automotive share is not possible because you have to look at the overall products company manufactures. And if the automotive share gets too small, it is overlapped by other industries. For example, I had a company which were doing 20% automotive, but had a 25% share in the medical industry as well. And what has been booming this year tremendously is the medical industry. Have you seen the results of Plexus lately?
Yep.
Yeah. They are doing very well. And even so we're talking Corona, Plexus reported a plus of 3.3% in the first half of 2020, which is in those days a tremendous good result. But that is due to the fact that they have nearly no automotive. Yeah? Whereas we have other companies who have a high share of automotive, they suffer a lot.
You know, and that's interesting because you're taking me back to when I was a market researcher and consultant in this industry. We used to advise companies to EMS companies. We called it the stool, have at least 3 legs to stand on, right? And those being 3 sectors. You didn't want to be overly weighted, or you become the Alcatel who decided everything was telecom. And then when telecom went down, they couldn't sustain, right? So is that same, you see that same kind of strategy applying?
Yeah. See, once in a while, growth of the EMS companies is driven by the customers. Customers come with much bigger building programs, still wanting to have a specific supplier for the product. And then all of a sudden you get this mismatch that the company is not standing on 3 legs anymore, but it might have only 2 legs, or even worse, having 80-85% automotive share, which more or less means standing on 1 leg.
Yeah.
Now,
exactly.
If somebody is shaking this 1 leg, it gets quite tough for a company. And I've done an analysis on the distribution of the revenue changes this year with 119 companies in Europe. And you can see there is about 74% of the companies who had a decline in their revenues, but there was as well 26% of companies who had an increase of their revenues. But those with a decline, we saw companies who had in the region of 30 to 40% less in revenue. Now, let's be realistic. That is such a bad development that it is really, it can get dark. Yeah. And we can see it on my face already. It's getting darker. Just switch on the light. Yeah.
Where'd you go?
So you can see me again.
There you are. Okay, thank you. So I was wondering what was happening there. When your head disappeared was the strangest.
Yes, I know. Yes, once in a while they call me Headless Nick.
So tell me, let's keep talking about the industry. You brought up the customers, and that's an interesting point. You know, everything comes from the OEMs, right? So I guess I have a couple of questions here. Do you have any sense in your analysis? We always talked about total available market, right? How much is there? And then how much has the EMS industry penetrated of that, right? So the total served market. Do you have a sense of, within Europe at least, from the OEMs there, what's your sense of how much is still in-house, that their OEMs are still manufacturing themselves?
Well, we have a lot of figures over here in Europe. We have several associations who generate figures. We have as well other market researchers who have figures which they share, some very professional, others not that professional. But if we look at the figures from a PCBA level of business, you can, the latest figure I have, and apologies that it's from 2018, but still it's, in my opinion, good enough to show the difference. 126 billion euros in PCBA manufacturing by the OEMs plus the EMS. So the EMS have had 2 years ago a revenue share of about 33%. That by now has increased to 35, 36%.
Okay.
My analysis shows as well that going back or starting to analyze in 2013, so the last 7 years, that the EMS industry has grown much faster, much more than the OEMs. And especially at this very moment, the numbers I hear from other associations like the association ZVEI in Germany, who track such numbers as well, they are predicting the OEM industry to see a 10 to 14% decline, whereas I in Germany predict for the EMS industry minus 8.2%. So again, the EMS industry is growing more and it's suffering less.
Okay.
So this is a good picture. And especially when the visibility for an OEM gets less and he cannot fully utilize his own production, I think it has become time for several OEMs to rethink their company strategy and whether it is not worthwhile to transfer business to a professional manufacturing partner, an EMS company in Europe, which can really partner with their OEMs and with manufacturers of products and have only cost per unit rather than having a huge production sitting idle with huge fixed costs and overheads and everything.
Yeah. So well, I was going to ask as a follow-on on that, and that makes complete sense what you're saying there. That's the rationale for outsourcing in many cases. How is that, do you see the relationship between the OEMs and the EMS changing? I mean, historically, it's been very transactional, right? But in many cases, as OEMs outsource more, it becomes more strategic. How would you characterize it in Europe?
I think the European EMS industry and me fighting for this industry, we still have a big job to do because we still have this problem that many OEMs do not know the EMS industry at all. And they might have heard that Apple is not manufacturing the phones themselves, but manufacture them via Foxconn. Yeah, but I had this situation where a French OEM called me in April, and he was badly suffering from the fact that he had his product made in the past in China by 2 different companies, but both in the same country. And now with the Corona shutdown, he was not getting a single product out of China anymore. And he was doing all of his business via the internet, selling his product via the internet. And all of a sudden his stores were empty and he couldn't sell any products anymore. Can you imagine how hurting this is? So he called me up he called me up and he said, well, I've seen on the internet that you are working in the European EMS industry and you know all of them. Do you have a recommendation who could manufacture my products? And I mentioned more or less not only the biggest European EMS, but two other big European EMS as well, recommended them to him. And the answer was, I've never heard of them.
Yeah.
So
That's amazing.
it is, this industry has not done enough in regards to marketing, actively marketing the fact that there is a manufacturing partner there who can do it much better. I give you another example, and sorry if I'm talking too much.
Let me ask a question there and then do your example, because I want to challenge that a bit, because my assumption when I was consulting was always that every OEM on the planet was aware of the EMS industry. Whether they chose to engage or not was a different question, right? That after many decades of EMS existing and salespeople running around the globe, knocking on everybody's door, trying to get their business, that at some level of their consciousness, they were aware that this industry existed. However, in their particular situation, they didn't understand it well enough or didn't judged it not effective for their particular situation. So it's amazing when I hear you say that somebody as recently as this year had never heard of them and is just unaware of it. That's just, maybe he knew of the industry, but didn't know particular players.
Well, you just mentioned a point which I think is very interesting. You said salespeople are running around knocking at OEM's doors. Yeah. I assume you mean cold acquisition, yeah? Going there saying, hey, here I am, yeah? Yeah. You wouldn't believe it. Only few EMS do that, yeah? Now, I have this funny story about Foxconn again. How did Terry Gou become big? 20, 30 years ago, he flew over to the United States. He talked with big EMS. He said, show me your products. He didn't do a calculation. He just stated, I can manufacture your product at 20% less cost. And you know, that is a situation which is still true as of today. Mm-hmm. Most of the OEMs have a big overhead structure. They have a big cost structure. They are not lean, yeah? So I always tell my European EMS customers over here, I said, you don't need to do a calculation. Go out to the OEMs, tell them you do it for 20% less, like Terry Gou did, and you will grow at the same speed as Honhai is growing. So yep. It is, Terry Gou was a very successful businessman, and yep. The fact that so much product moved from the United States to China was number one, Boston Consulting, yeah? And number two, the fact that the OEM managers weren't doing their jobs. They were getting bigger and bigger and creating more overhead costs. And one day they were not competitive anymore. And yep. With the EMS industry, they can regain competitiveness. Yeah? And that is the point, the message I want to spread here. We have so much fantastic EMS companies in Europe, and I'm not just talking about the big ones. Yeah, I have. If you look at my list of sponsors here in the back, I have even small companies, for example, in Switzerland, Hengartner, Foch, who are doing a fantastic job in specific areas of this electronics industry. And they are supporting my work and I support them. And that is the way it is supposed to be. And any OEM listening to us over here, I can only tell you, give me a call and I'll tell you whom you should choose for your manufacturing partner. did a new service on it. I installed something called EMS Scout. If you go onto the home on the internet under EMS scout.de, you find a list of 655 EMS companies in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland who can manufacture your jobs. And then I can, I'm just installing it. The buyers can insert different criteria in regards to where they want to have the company, what they should be specialized in, revenue size, all of that. And then they get a list of companies which are optimum for them to talk to. Yeah. So,
and that's a good point, because when I used to do that for a living, when we would advise OEMs on outsourcing, one of the metrics we used was to be about at least 20% of the business of your EMS partner, so that you command the mind share and the attention at that EMS. You don't want to go in and be 1% of a huge, so kind of right sizing the relationships. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think in the same way, or?
Yeah, it's.
I mean, a small startup within a huge Foxconn,
Well,
how does that work well?
What I've seen in regards to the smaller, first of all, there is space for everybody. There is space for the small revenue EMS and for the big ones. And see, if talking about startup OEMs, we see a lot of companies with a lot of brilliant ideas, but they have this brilliant idea, but they have no capital to invest in manufacturing this brilliant idea. They might not have the knowledge in regards to how optimal to manufacture the product on an optimal way. And especially for those companies, it's very important that they find the right partner for their product. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the biggest EMS in Europe. Often a smaller one, let's say 20 million in revenues, might be able to serve him much better, because he can focus on this startup much more than a big company with 500, 600, 700 million euros does, or is willing to do.
And that was precisely my point, Dieter, was that, kind of right sizing that relationship to make sure that you are a significant enough customer that you command. When you call, they pick up the phone, and right.
So
okay,
and that is the market of the EMS to help those startups companies. And let's be realistic: a small one, customer today might be a big one tomorrow, depending on what kind of product he has and what. How much he can convince the market with his product.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you a question. I was looking at one of the slides, and I'm going to open this up here, about the differences within Europe. And you were talking about the difference between East and West. But the other one I want to ask you about is, what the heck are they doing up in the Nordic countries up there? Because in the Nordic countries, they're seemingly having really good success.
Yes, I can tell you, and you don't just need to look at their quarter, half year, and 3-quarter reporting. You just need to look at their share price. Just take note as an example. Earlier this year, they had a share price of around 32 euros per share. And sorry, it was not 32 euros, because they are being traded in Swedish krona. It was 30 2 Swedish krona was the share price. And I think this week the share price is at 58 Swedish krona. It nearly doubled. Yeah, and they do a very professional marketing in regards to hammering out the positive news to the shareholder. And well, if you look at their growth rates of 15.8%, then they have all reason to hammer out positive news.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just revenues that were increasing, it was the profits that were increasing as well. Now, Scanfil, the official one, was plus 10%, but we have to realize they had acquired an EMS company in Germany last year. And so I had to correct this a little bit. But still, again, Scanfil as well did a plus 3.3% in increase. And then we have Kitron in Norway. Now, what is important on, or what is similar on those companies is all they leave the fingers of automotive industry. Yeah, they are heavily involved in the medical industry, in air and space, in defense. Yeah, and that is where products or markets where you can still make a good profit margin, and you don't see a decline at the moment. Yeah.
Yep. No, that's very good. I know that was noteworthy in the slides when I was looking through them, that you had something, they're doing something right up north there. So listen, we're going to have to wrap here soon. I always run out of time with you, but I want to ask, as we look forward then to beyond COVID now and the pandemic, for hopefully in our rearview mirror moving forward, in 2021 and beyond, I saw your forecast before, it was showing, continual growth in the industry. What's driving that?
Well, number one is there is still this hope that 2021 we'll see similar revenues than we had in 2019. But to a lot of companies, this hope will not fulfill. The big ones, yes, they will be back to 2019 revenues. But the small ones, it'll take up to the end of 2022 before they get back to it. And if you have a look at it, you see specifically looking at the West, which is the dark blue bars going over to the light blue bars, you can see that the 2019 figures were 21.3 billion, but that is only exceeded again in 2023. So, and that is a problem. It will take the West longer to get back, for the simple reason there is a lot of cost pressure at the moment, and many companies, especially the big ones, are at the same time, as long as they have other factories, low-cost factories, they are shifting products from the high labor cost countries over to either the Eastern European companies, and some have as well low labor cost factories in the Far East, like in4ma has one factory in India. We have GPV, they have factories in Thailand and Sri Lanka. We have Vario Systems, they have a factory in Sri Lanka. So these people, or Enix, they have factory in China. They can shift product as long as the customer accepts it. They can shift production, which gives them a cost advantage. Yeah, and they're doing that. That is why the West will need longer to get back. But let's be realistic. Anybody thinking we will ever get back to the good old days in 2019 is totally wrong. we're not going back to the good old days, because we see a lot of changes at the same time. We see, for example, that we are constantly now talking via Teams, Zoom, Skype, and you name it. And there is much less traveling. I don't think that business travel, for example, will ever get back to the same ratio as it was in the past. Yeah? Managers, for cost reason, will insist that a lot more communication is done on a digital way. We will see as well that a lot of control in production is being done in a digital way. We see a lot of traceability tools. All of that is combined with big data. So we will need many more servers, good for Inventec, Foxconn, and Wistron, that we need all these servers. That is the way we go forward. For the small companies specifically, it means don't plan that you can have the same strategy that you used to have the last 10 years. You need to develop yourself new. You need to reinvent yourself. Yeah, I call it go into a metamorphosis. Yeah, change yourself from the ugly caterpillar into a beautiful butterfly. Yeah, and have a new strategy. And if you're very small, look for partners. Don't do everything yourself. Doing something in a team is much better. Partner up with some of your competitors, which you think you can work with. Partner with somebody who has a factory in the East who can help you in manufacturing low-cost product. Try to get together to form purchasing commodities, to be able to buy your components together in order to get better prices. All of that is possible. And if you have a group of small companies, you can even go to an OEM who has a larger portion of products which he wants to transfer. And you can say, well, one of us cannot do it all on himself. But as a group, we can help you, and you have this, you know that whenever something happens in one of the factories, the others can still continue manufacturing. It's not a single sourcing. It's a new way of multiple sourcing and a new strategy for the smaller EMS companies to cope with the future.
Yeah, that was very good. I must say that that's what I always appreciate about you, Dieter, is you study the numbers, you understand the industry intimately, and you are a great ambassador and advocate for it still, and maintain this optimism and a good way of portraying both, you know, the challenges, but also the opportunities. And I think that's what people want to hear. So thank you for that. You are, you're a real value to the industry, I must say.
There is a German saying, if you look at the back of me, whose bread you eat, whose song you sing.
I was always told it's immer vorwärts, right? Always move forward. But listen, I want to say to the audience, anybody watching out there, and Dieter, you mentioned your new, the EMS Scout. Maybe we talk about that in the new year at some point, because I think that's an interesting conversation. But I want to say to people watching this, in4ma, in4ma, Dieter Weiss. If you want to know something about the EMS industry in Europe, this is the gentleman that you should reach out to. If you can't get a hold of him, get a hold of me, because I have the bat phone that I can pick up, and he answers when he's not climbing mountains in the Alps somewhere. So Dieter, Dieter, this has been a pleasure, sir. I always look forward to, and then enjoy, and then I always feel we never had enough time together. So, so thank you for your time today.
Eric, I look forward to meeting you again in Europe and have an Estonian beer again at one of the fairs in Germany.
I look forward to that. And I want to say, like we say here in Texas, Dieter, bleib sicher. Und ich wünsche Sie ein frohes Fest und ein frohes neues Jahr.
Thank you, Eric. As we say over here in Germany, have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Thank you very much, sir. Take care.
Take care as well. Bye-bye, Eric.
Bye-bye.